I'm a PhD student at the Oslo School of Architecture and Design. Currently wrapping up a PhD this past month, and also a design associate at the Monviso Institute here, and have been really excited about this session and kind of digging into these topics with you all.
Yeah, Birger. I mean, we know you already.
I'm the emeritus professor at the Oslo School of Architecture. I've been working with systems thinking and design since 2006. I could guess something like that. Starting the systems-oriented design program at the Oslo School of Architecture and Design.
And there's Peter. Hello.
Good morning from Mexico City. I'm Peter Jones. I'm now a professor at Tecnológico de Monterrey. Been here this year and also at OCAD University. So having worked in the RSD community and collaborating with Birger from going back to RSD1, I think our roots at OCAD University were integrating systems thinking courses in the Strategic Foresight and Innovation Master Design Program, which was planned and started back in 2007, 2008. So we've been working in parallel on these streams and found each other in 15 years ago.
Let's dive in. We have this Miraboard link copied. It's actually an editor right, so please don't delete anything. And there's some green marks to add something. So please don't delete or move, just add. And which is Miraboard here as well. We don't have slides, but a Miraboard in best traditions of Thought and Beyond. Let me just find my cursor, which disappeared in where? Ah, yeah, okay. Yeah, sometimes two screens are tricky. Here we go. Yeah, so we're having this Miraboard here. We're having 1 hour for the session, and we're diving right away into here the flow of the session. Just as a bit of context, what we're expecting. It's here in the middle. You can follow my cursor as well if you're on Miro yourself. So I'm going to start to explain a bit the context of this session and the formative framework that we're presenting here, which is the base of the new Systemic Design Certificate of Advanced Studies as part of the Master in Advanced Studies at ETH Zürich and engineering universities. That's a bit the setup. And then Haley is going to take us a bit into some of the empirical grounding from and around this work in a PhD, which was just finished. Submitted. And then we diving a bit more in work that also our colleague Sylvia Wojciechowska worked on with us. And then there's the time to have Peter and Birger hopefully hone into some reflections with their rich knowledge of the field and preparing a bit for a bit of a discourse in between us, and then opening in the end for everyone to hone a bit more. Saying this, we have the chat, obviously, and also this Miraboard, and we're having here on the left side on the bottom seeds of so-called North Stars of systemic design, reflections, so anything that anybody has here on their mind, ideas, questions, critical assessments, please drop a post-it note here and participate in the debate already. And same time, we have this framework here, where we have this explanatory part later. Please add any missing methods, such as lifecycle assessment or drone flight protocol, in here, just using as well post-it notes. So this is the session, and we're having context here, which I'm starting with. We are here today to share perspectives on the possibilities and also obstacles to further evolving systemic design as a field, which is of course very varied. And the direction we are focusing on here is navigating towards the relational value of different types of inquiry. And the focus is on more science, more engineering, and also a deeper look into ourselves, our own inner processes. And this work has been, many contributors. It's a lot also of course, from all the work around with RSD and SDA and AHO, but also for myself being somehow, sandwiched sometimes, being at an engineering university at ETH for some years and at AHO for some years. And I often felt we don't understand each other. We don't speak each other's language. We in science engineering don't really value sometimes design. We in design sometimes don't look really at science or engineering. And out of practice and embodiment, we feel there is more that we can learn from each other and give each other. So the guiding questions for the session as examples, please feel free to add more. And thoughts are here: how, yes or no, should we expand systemic design as a field in practice? Question. The cultures of design science have been lacking mutual understanding, and their reciprocal potential is underused. So we want to work on this, and that's why we developed this program. Science, engineering, and the inner processes of the systemic designer, as of enacting complexity and being part of complex systems, deserve more attention. And so what types of inquiry deserve more attention? How do we integrate scale deep, scale out, but not scale up? What methods and practices should be added to that non-exhaustive list below? I mean, it's just a start of what we found is relevant in the work we've been doing. And then how might we transfer these approaches, which we're explaining now, to a diverse range of contexts? So what can we learn from that everybody brings in here in the future? So that's a bit the context. This is the formative framework, and I want to quickly go over it. I'm going to do it quite fast. We're going to revisit it. So these are 5 types of inquiry on the outer shell, like science and the processes. And we are teaching the relational value of these methods and practices within these types of inquiry. And so the designer stands in the center, which is not user-centric design. We talk about design for planetary health, design for life, let's say, but we start from the perspective of people taking decisions. And what we like to focus on is building up on real-world challenges that are complex, and focus on the challenge that these complex aspects bring to us. So we want to ask questions. Why do we need to intervene as a designer? If so, where? So bring into place specificity. If we know that and where, the question is, when is the right timing? Sometimes we might not better do any kind of intervention. Then comes the question, okay, what do we then need to intervene on? And that is part of this circle of different methods and practices. And only then when we decide that we, for example, need a life cycle analysis, then we can see how can we do it or who can help us to do it. But the idea is here to understand that all these methods and practices and many more have relevance. And if we understand what they are good for, that they are there, and what the relational value is, we can better navigate with this kind of compass here, asking questions. And at the end, building a capacity that we call organic emergence, which is the kind of, joyfully embracing complexity and let's say have the inner trust that we can deal with what we don't know. And before I give over to Haley, just as context, this is the new ETH Zürich program, the Master of Advanced Studies in Regenerative Systems. We are sitting right now in this building here where my arrow is, left of the group. And the product is built up out of this tree metaphor with 4 massive open online courses and 4 elements of the Executive Master. The MOOC series is for free, cost-free, and there are now about 8,500 people from 150 nations inscribed in the first 2 MOOCs. MOOC number 3, Systemic Design, is in development. And part of what we're doing right now in time production is learning as well from everyone here again at this RSD and seeing what and who would like to contribute to this MOOC as well. The CAS, the Certificate of Advanced Studies, is already starting to run next week. And you can see later on a bit the melody and the rhythm of MOOCs and CAS, because someone who does the CAS has to have done the MOOC itself. So that's a bit as a context, and I'm happy to hand over to Haley.
I'm going to just share my screen.
Can you share?
Yeah. Can you help me share? Oh, here we go. Okay. Can everyone see the screen again? Yes? Okay, great. Yeah, so I just wanted to share briefly a bit of the kind of empirical side of some of these concepts that Tobias has been explaining. Oh, unmute? No, later. Sorry. With my PhD project that I have been wrapping up these last few months. So I've been a PhD student at the Oslo School of Architecture and Design with systems-oriented design, and Birger has been one of my co-supervisors along with Tobias. And I have been exploring the relationships between how we can think about using systems-oriented design as a way to understand relationships across different methods and practices, as Tobias was mentioning earlier in the diagrams. So really trying to understand, what does something as complex and theoretical and conceptual as methodological pluralism might look like in practice? What does it mean to weave together social network analysis methods from sciences with participation in place-based activities, or interactive design-based booklets, giga mapping, interviews? So really, I was curious to understand how those sort of insights could emerge by weaving those across 3 different mountain communities. Ostana, Italy is where Tobias and I are based right now at the Mombiso Institute. Another mountain community that I was working with is in Hemsedal in Norway, where we were closely connected with Aho. And then in Mammoth Lakes, California, which we had very little connection, some previous ties with other research institutes there, but this was another key aspect of how we think about methodological pluralism across different places in the real world based on our different relationships with these communities. And then seeing over time how those sort of adaptations evolved. This diagram here represents a timeline across each community, so Ostana, Hemsedal, and Mammoth Lakes, and prototyping how different sort of tests of a giga mapping workshop or interviews or stakeholder engagements or different embodied practices like the systemic cycles tours across each of these communities sort of could evolve over time based on emerging events or seasonal changes or different stakeholder relationships that evolved over time. So the goal with this project was really trying to understand, how can we navigate through this emergence and this intentional sort of weaving through the unknown. And as Tobias was alluding to earlier, we recently published an article in Context that describes this process further and really kind of highlighting the value of having multimodal reflexivity to navigate different aspects of boundaries, of data, of how we think about relationships to theories, to context, to people, to places. So yeah, this is just a sort of sneak peek of that. Some pictures here from these different experiences. But we wanted to just kind of zoom in, particularly here where we are located. So this was an interactive booklet that I made as part of the different portfolio of methods. And this booklet here actually shows the building that we are physically in right now called the Doppio, which is on the Mombiso Institute campus. And it's a passive net positive house. So really utilizing what we like to call is high tech, or high brain, low tech. Using the best sort of creative possibilities to really merge local, traditional building materials and ways of constructing here in Ostana with the most, technologically advanced capabilities for renewable energy and whatnot. So we thought we could use this as an example to also tie back to the compass that we saw earlier. I'll hand it back to Tobias.
Yeah, just a very quick last snapshot on this before we hand over to our colleagues here. I'm zooming in again on this framework, and I just want to have 2 or 3 more minutes to explain how we could use it and how we intend to use it also in the course. So I made these red dots here in preparation of just guiding quickly through. And when I, as a person in the middle, would say, okay, the complex challenges in this case is further developing the passive house standard in a quite challenging cultural environment, like in the Italian mountain community. So one thing is the technical aspects, which is not so difficult, but the cultural integration is extremely difficult and rich in learning. So what I would come to, that's my challenge. So why do I need to intervene? Yes, because I need to show and integrate people and help them understand what we want to do so they support us. So I would first think into integration of the building in the landscape. So I do a landscape design part here in the types of inquiry from design. So I do some plans, and then I see, oh, that's actually requires some more other methods. So I just start here and go over to do some photogrammetry and start a drone flight protocol to develop a kind of terrain model from this, which helps me to better visualize the kind of complexity so people can follow me. So I go back and think about some visual mapping from the field of system-oriented design. And then I say, well, that's actually seems to be not enough. So we need more data. We need to have some, let's say, quantitative data about the life cycle analysis or circularity analysis of the building to have better arguments that are science-based, and it's not just because I say it. So we maybe engage a student here to do a study, which is then a scientific base. And then we bring that back and maybe go back to some designerly practice, say we need to have a better graphical representation of this, and also in different ways. Maybe we need some hand sketching. And then we say, oh, the integration with people is really difficult. So we might get back and say we need to open up and rethink our worldviews that we came with as systemic designers. So we need to better learn about culture and language of the local population, the community, and integrate ourselves more. And this really, on the other hand, might require that we go back and build our inner processes, our patience, our frustration tolerance, our organic emergence, and maybe have to go for a solo night out or another inner processes development to be easier in this kind of real world lab. We were prototyping to eventually fuel my challenge and my questions as a compass in the center. So that's just one example how we could think about using this framework and making also didactic development.
You were breaking up a bit at the end there.
Oh, so that's if we break up sometimes, it's because we're benefiting from Elon Musk Starlink nets here up here in mountains, which is technically super, but we know there's some problems around Elon Musk lately, so that might be representing our Starlink failouts. So I'm handing over to Birger and Peter, please, for some reflections and shared thoughts and maybe your view on these questions and aspects.
Peter, go for it.
Oh, okay. I'll go first. I will also share a bit. First, I'll say that I think that this is an interesting session in that it may be the first time that we've taken a step back in the development of our different the trajectories of our practices, and have looked at how the foundations of teaching, of the research, and of the types of studies that we've been developing have led to different areas of development and expertise and training with our students that are somewhat different. I'm gonna share the section of the Miro board. Excuse my noticing the I'm learning Espanol, and sometimes I'm not sure how to pronounce miro. Is it a miro, or do I roll the R? So I'm showing. You should be seeing the section of the Miro board where I'm you would be seeing some of the systemic design tools, the systemic design toolkit, and the MOOC, or the massive online course, or at least it's massively available, that Christel Van Eyl and I've been teaching through the Service Design College ever since about 6 months after the book was published, Design Journeys Through Complex Systems. So the methodology in Design Journeys was developed out of the Systemic Design Toolkit, which goes back to Christel Van Eyl's work from Naumann and other, and sharing that at RSD5 in Toronto. So ever since then, we've been collaborating within SDA and between Christel and I in developing the book as a platform for further developing the tools that are used for collaboration around different methods and theories drawn from systems theory and applied in systemic design that are more oriented towards system change, social systems design, system change programs, and leading complex projects that could be used, that could have effect within industries, ecosystems, transition. And we've been teaching this in an 8-week course in the Service Design College. We're now in the middle of another one, even concurrent with RSD, Systemic Design for Tackling Complexity. So it's one of the reasons it's probably good to compare notes between the other online course platforms. Ours, so probably because of the different practitioner work and research that we've done, but also the focus of our graduate programs. So at OCAD University, we have a Master of Design in Strategic Foresight and Innovation, but not a PhD. But we do a lot of work that expands beyond the PhD. So this, with people that continue with it. But the development of the approach, and I think some of the response, I would say, to the involving STEM disciplines and the methodological pluralism is that we have, I use something of a framework from the different scales of design from design domains. So design 1.0, 2, 3, and 4 that are the scales of design practice that involve complexity at different levels. And in any complex project, we might use all of them. We might be working, for example, in the Flourishing Enterprise Institute, which has a focus on, in the sticky note, you see up here 2 sticky notes at the top. Managing is designing, which I've added in systemic management innovation. I added those because they weren't represented yet in this sketch. That the managing is designing goes back to work from Case Western, that is back from about the same period that Birger and I we're referencing. So the 2006 to 2009 period. And this was the germination of rethinking systemic thinking in management. And recently, we've been developing a platform for systemic management innovation that expands what we've developed with the flourishing business model, which is still very much a viable platform. But now there are many other tools. So we don't just develop these tools as tools. They involve methodological pluralism. That is, there's management practices that are kind of up here at the top at the level of social systems and organizations, and working with practices that develop organizations, which could be companies, change teams, nonprofits, but municipalities, which we're doing a lot of research in partnership with the Flourishing Enterprise Institute. And that's a whole track on Tuesday. But here we're looking at the methods. We could involve some or any of these that we're now framing as systemic management innovations, which we'll talk about on Tuesday as well. But this is, if you consider that a municipality is also an organization, that at the level of design 3, if you will, designing with and for the social system that is an enterprise, that it has purposes beyond the enterprise, that the municipality is integrating across the ecosystem, the economy, and the benefits for society. And so those involve different methods at each of these different levels of design, 1, 2, 3, and 4, that can be thought of as scales of practice that involve different methods, but the research that involves them can involve them all together in ways that, if I had the time, I could draw them out. And one of the other areas that we work in would be healthcare is a good example. And these are now working with in Mexico for the development of these research platforms with systemic design, with a larger school, Tecnológico de Monterrey. So these are we're continuing to build on this platform, and I think that there's a lot we can learn between them. And my reflection on the approach to navigating the methods from the work in ecosystem design and the methodological pluralism is that some of the direction that we've been developing in social system design and working with enterprises and organizations, and the different tools that we've been essentially forging, testing, and using in organizational practices and in leadership and management could have real exchange and on your side, and then we can learn from the development of the practices in the ecosystem itself, in ecological transitions that could, for example, our work with municipalities, offer a very significant way to work with bioregional development and learning from the practices that you've got, for example, in our different Canadian projects with municipalities in Canada and perhaps in Mexico. So that is our corner of the world and the development of it, and happy to hear any reflections between the different models that we're sharing. And Birger? And yeah, Birger, would you like to also add some of your...
Yes, sorry, I was muted. I'm trying to share. Yeah. I want to just jump to this diagram that was made some years ago. And as I see it, systems-oriented design is somewhere in this tension field. And it is closer to, it's not centralized, it's closer to design practice. So it would be somewhere here, still drawing from systems thinking and systems practice, but gravitating more towards design practice. I will just share, let me just move this if I manage. Okay. Just to say a little bit about, because we're actually talking about those differences in the educational programs, and this goes directly to what Tobias his sort of question or proposal of bringing more science into the process. In a way, this is the systems-oriented design page, and these are our from our executive master, those two new entries here. This one is from a group of 3 of service designers at the NAV, this kind of national hub for social services. And this one is done by a engineer from Kongsberg Maritime, I think. So there are 2, these are service designers, and this is an engineer with hardcore engineering. So it's a very big span between those and the different knowledge areas. And this we can see across the whole cohort or groups we had. Now we're starting with a 3rd group in February, I think. And my take on this, Tobias's question of should there be mere science? And then my first question is, what is science? And for me, could be from soft sciences like the humanities, etc., to hard sciences, natural sciences. And I would say yes, but different for each project. It's not something that we would or I would suggest it should be fixed in the framework, but that it would be very adaptable. So these guys from working in the social services sector at Digital Hub for Oslo municipality, and this guy working in the private sector in a super advanced engineering company, they would have different types of knowledges that way they would bake into their approaches, bringing with them the designerly way of thinking. So just to show you very shortly, if it works, yeah, here we go, how this might look in the case of the service designers. A bit slow here. Sorry. Here we go. It's all accessible, the full reports, and I want to go to the appendix, to this appendix of the gigamaps, and they give you an idea of how does different information, different types of information has been integrated in this project, where you have some systems maps, and actors and relationships. Here you would have another system map. Just waiting for loading here. Sorry, I didn't test this up front. And here trying to make sense of the whole picture. How systems would transition, and different layers of relationships, feedback loops, and a map of the system. So what I was actually looking for, which might be in the other appendix here, but we don't need to go there. You can investigate it yourself. But there are also large service design blueprints, etc. So the whole point with this is to show something that also actually Tobias showed in this first framework, that you have those different knowledges, and you would go for that, and you would engage in those different knowledges, take them from where you find them or where they are needed. Those could be soft knowledges like talking to people, or they could be taken from hard natural sciences, etc. But my point is that I wouldn't subscribe to a model where this would be prescribed in a certain way, but that it is project dependable. It's dependable on, for each project sort of needs its own method. And that's what I think about. It's very, we gravitate towards models, prescriptions, and in a way, I think this can be very, very powerful and very good, but we should never forget that to a certain degree, every project has its unique aspect, and we need to have this open-mindedness and not making the models close down our minds. So I think I stop here. So I don't know if that made sense. I hope so. I must say it has been a joy to work with Tobias and especially Haley. We always had these wonderful creative discussions whenever we were talking. It has been great.
Yeah, thank you, Birger, Peter. I think Haley has a question here. Just want to get back on one point, Birger. The kind of formative framework we're showing, the focus is, as I said, challenge-based navigation. So we're having a set of inquiries and a set of open types of methods and practices, and it's absolutely dependent on the challenge, on the project, on the approach. So it's extremely individual. And what we want to learn is to increase our portfolio of inquiries, because if we don't know, for example, what a social network analysis is good for, we cannot see the value of it. It's not about being perfect in such hard science methods, but rather understanding what are the cultures of these different engagement types. How can we use them and project specific? But Haley,
I mean, that's a very interesting question, actually, because I tend to think that I'm not going to do the social systems analysis because there's somebody else who can do that. They are very good at it. I don't know it very well, but I have to know it enough to be in the repertoire, stuck in somewhere in the tool chest. If I don't have this tool in my tool chest, I would never facilitate that type of investigation to be applied at all. So, I mean, there's a balance between that. You have this rich repertoire, and how much knowledge or how much ability to execute those tools you have to possess for each systemic designer. Being a systemic designer is, of course, like you said, you embrace complexity, but it can be quite overwhelming with all the interdisciplinarity of the knowledges and the perspectives you have to sort of navigate. Hello, Praveen. Nice to see you.
Hello. Hi.
Well,
so
Praveen, question.
Oh, yeah. I just wanted to kind of invite a probing question based on this discussion we're having, and to you, Peter and Birger. So if we look at the Systemic Design Association website definition for systemic design being, quote, an interdiscipline that joins systems thinking to design methodology. So I'm wondering, based on this discussion we're having around pluralism and whatnot, would you see an expanded definition, or how would you react to kind of this current definition we have now? And this can also be something that everyone here can add to the Miro on the reflection page that we showed earlier. What definitions come to mind to you based on your own practices and experiences? So maybe I just leave that for Peter and Birger to kind of chew on, and then we can open it up to the floor.
I'll just say really quickly that I think that definition is the simplest one, and it's on the website as a way to just capture the perhaps broadest range of practices and approaches that could be considered, especially by people who are just asking the question, what is systemic design? What's the organization about? What's the space that you're in? I mean, I think in some of our articles, we have more focused definitions. But I think as we're looking at the spaces of research and inquiry and how that's done, we certainly are, when we look at the range of methodologies that are available between systemic practices, that is, across systems theory and systems practice, and design theory, design methodology, design research, and design practices. We really are blending at times from across all these. And we work a little differently, I think, in education than we might in practice, where there are very often budget, time, and scope project constraints on working with sponsors, clients, and projects. And then we have different constraints that limit the time or the types of methods that we might have with master's or PhD students in our areas as well. So the adaptation of this wide range of practices and inquiries is important to learn from, because our different students are taking different pathways through that mix that are available to them, and then we're also learning through practice as well.
Yeah. Dick Buchanan said in the last millennium once, long ago, in a speech that you cannot define design. You cannot make a definition of design, because design is a theme which has many different what do you call manifestations. And I think even more so with systemic design, I don't think it's very productive to try to define it, but that we have to manifestate it in those different appearances in a way, and not lock down to something or try to nail it to the wall, so to say. So I think this type of openness would be very cool, and it would allow also the expansion you are asking for. Of course, we can expand it, and if you expand it, then this definition, if it's called definition, I don't remember. It's not sufficient anymore, and I would say commit the crime. Don't hesitate with break the rules of those definitions, and let's call it themes, and that opens it up. Yeah, well, what do people think? Tobias?
Yeah, thank you. Let's open up for anybody who wants to join in. And as an icebreaker, the question we had in our Miro, the first one, how, in brackets, should we expand systemic design as a field in practice? And someone said, why expand?
Yeah, that's a good one.
So why expand? Well, I can give one motivation. Working in science, in kind of design academics, and in practice, I feel like over a long time we don't meet each other, which is a pity. So if we don't learn more about each other's worldviews and cultures, of how we enact complexity with the design of the agency, then we're losing potential. And that's what we mean with expanding, of better understanding each other's dialects and languages, and growing the kind of practices around enacting with complexity design anyway. Yeah. So, but maybe let's open it if somebody would like to take the mic and contribute with a reflection or thoughts or question, please.
Maybe I can jump in with some reflections. I think that, I mean, thank you for trying to highlight the landscapes and the kind of, I think, and jumping in between different domains, and also it seems to me that there's a tension between the generalization and the specifics here, because I think whenever, I mean, one can maybe, to my mind, and from my experience, one can maybe say, one can draw some general lines about different domains that one may encounter, even try to categorize it somehow. However, I think the discussions becomes much more interesting when they meet a certain context or a certain constraint, as Peter was mentioning, because I think that those boundaries that kind of constrain an inquiry with this, with a systemic approach, is kind of what makes these discussions much more interesting and much more specific. So I wonder whether maybe regarding the the themes that you were exploring, for instance, Haley, with these mountain communities. To what I was kind of curious to learn more about some of the specific issues, systemic issues that you were encountering during your inquiries that may inform some of these questions, maybe, or add some granularity to them. That's kind of what I was curious to hear more about.
I'll just respond. Yeah, thanks, Jonathan. I think maybe I'll actually give it over to some folks here who I see hands up, but there's a lot of specific details in the article that Peter just shared in the chat. So we can have a look at that. You have Kinsey here with a hand up.
Yeah, hi, good morning.
Hi.
Well, it's morning here anyway. I'm in the US. It's interesting to hear you talk about the interest and desire to connect with other sectors and disciplines, because I was at a conference this summer where the same conversation came up, and lamenting the fact that there wasn't more of that. And it's something that's common in my circles. I noticed this is my first time here in the Systemic Design Association meetings. And I have found it frustrating in that context that people express that desire and yet they don't really recognize where those potential points are. That context was very tech-centric. It comes viewed that way. And so that was part of it, kind of people coming from tech not having as great of awareness of humanities and social sciences. It seems to me, looking at the program here, that that's less so because there's much more of a mix. But my question is, with that in mind, what efforts and overtures have people made to get those synergies and reach out? Because it's something that I want from what I have done, which is not this community, but very relevant. But it's hard to get to those conversations, even though people seem to be interested in having those. Let me know if that isn't clear.
Yeah, maybe I missed the last part of that a bit. Could you just rephrase the main question?
Seems like there's a desire here, and then also in this other group, which is very complementary to in other ones, I'm sure as well, to make connections with other disciplines, sectors, ways of doing things to enrich what we're doing here. And yet it doesn't seem to be happening as much as I feel like it shouldn't be as hard as I feel like it is from the perspective of these different groups that I've been talking to. So I'm curious about what efforts people here have made to reach out and make connections elsewhere, and kind of put that out there so people are more aware of what you're doing to facilitate those interconnections. Is that clear?
Yeah, no, that's great. I think it's so spot on. I can reflect a little bit from my own experience and maybe also touch a bit on what Jonathan was mentioning in terms of the specifics in some of this work. I think when trying to engage transdisciplinarily, it was so clear to me the importance of having different entry points. Everyone kind of speaks their own language from where they're coming from, whether it's someone based in a local community, in a regional setting, politician, someone in the sustainability transitions world where I was participating in conferences and whatnot. So that really became a kind of design exercise for me to kind of understand, oh, where are they coming from and how can I maybe learn a bit more their language and also tailor the communication around that more, because then it's a way to kind of jump across barriers. You know, I've been working a lot with regeneration in my work, and it's still a fuzzy word for a lot of folks. But if you have a kind of forest scientist and you start talking about restoring ecosystems, that's a more of a hook to kind of get them into the conversation, or you know, different ways of using language. And I used a lot of visual tools in my work, but again, there's just such a wide variety of ways that we can try to be more creative in communicating with each other. So I'll just, yeah, leave it at that. But maybe if there's any other reflections in the last 4 minutes that we have.
We have only 4 minutes left. We have to
I'll just say real quick that I come from like more of an applied background, but also applied in theoretically informed research and research informed practice. And I'm very interested in that same thing, and have found it challenging to get into communities of discourse and practice that are connected to mine, because I span lots of different sectors too. So I put my LinkedIn in the chat, and I would be delighted, absolutely delighted and invigorated to talk to people about how to do that and facilitate connections with a couple other groups I'm part of that are looking for the same thing.
That's awesome.
Yes, I think we have to stop here. I just want to add that we have done a lot of work, exercises, and practicing interdisciplinarity, like to share the unknown unknowns, or share the questions that you didn't even know was a question for you. So there's quite some practice, which I think if you lift the whole problem up, it's a lot about that, but it's also, of course, about knowing have enough in cross-field knowledge. So thank you very much. It was really amazing how time flies in this session.